It is the festival of Isis. So if we actually look back, there's been a number of high-profile deaths which many commentators attribute to sacrifices to Isis. Within their occult belief system, the perverse occult belief system of those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of the planet, their belief system is very, very different from any belief system that's out in the public domain. The belief systems that they put out in the public domain, they're for the masses. Not for the elite as part of their control mechanism. Okay, this is James Murdoch's course. Anybody watch that charade in Parliament? I don't watch TV. I haven't had TV in the house for 7 years now. But on this occasion, I must confess that I did watch BBC iPlayer live when this was coming out. And I had to turn the sound down because I wanted to see the body language, and it's much easier to watch the body language and the facial expressions and the eye movements when you're not distracted by the audio. And my analysis is this guy was lying through his teeth. And I think that, obviously he's now doing some intellectual gymnastics because it's pretty much proven that he was aware of far more than he was admitting to when he gave the evidence in Parliament. But of course, one of the things that this certainly took out of the mainstream media was the fact that this country is being fleeced, along with pretty much every other country in the world right now. Of course, we're getting off marginally lighter than Libya, but every other country in the world, with the exception of Australia right now, and Venezuela, but every other country is being fleeced of its wealth. How many of you here saw my final meltdown presentation when I was last in Birkenhead? Okay, a few of you. But the global financial meltdown is a contrived event. And it's not rocket science, for those of us who do watch this, watch what's going on, we don't claim any special insight, we simply read the scripts. And a lot of the time we can simply look at what's going on and then look in the past and see when something similar was occurring, and we can therefore sort of pretty much predict what's coming. And so many of us in the early part of the mid-1980s, 2004 onwards, were saying, in 3 to 4 years, they're pumping so much fake money into the system, they're building up so much debt, eventually they'll pull the rug and they'll crash the economies. And of course that's exactly what happened. In Formula 1, which I recorded in July 2007, I said we're on the brink. We're on the absolute brink of seeing a bank collapse in the UK, and I think it was about 3 weeks after I recorded that Northern Rock collapsed. And with the exception of Iceland, which has taken a completely different tack, we'll touch a little bit more on Iceland later, but with the exception of Iceland, of course what's happening is the debt is being passed on to the taxpayer. But it's not necessary to us, it's to future generations. So, what is happening here is, because we're not really addressing, well, we're not at all addressing the problem, what we're effectively doing is subjugating and condemning future generations to phenomenal liabilities in terms of tax because of the overspending of this and previous generations. The only country that has found a way through that is Iceland, which is why we're not reading anything about what happened in Iceland. In Iceland, the economy crashed totally nearly 3 years ago. And most people, I remember that. I think I remember that. Literally crashed completely. How many people in Iceland have lost their houses in the last 3 years? None. Absolutely none. Because when the economy crashed, the Icelandic government made the observation. They said this is not the doing of the people, it's the banks. The banks have manipulated this situation. It's the banks that have created the problem, and it's the banks that have got to bear the pain. So they refused to bail out the banks. So it meant that they literally had to start from scratch. And they immediately stated that nobody would lose their home. Nobody would lose their home because they had bought into a property that they really should never have bought into. They got a mortgage they should never have got. But nobody's going to lose their home. The banks were going to have to eat the deficit. They also made the observation that nobody would starve. So what they did, by making those statements, they took away fear. They took away fear. And basically what they re-established, okay, it's a relatively small country, 300,000 people, but what they established was a renewed community spirit. You know, we're all in this together, nobody's going to lose their house, nobody's going to starve, but we've got to find a way through it, and they've rebuilt their economy. Much to the chagrin of the global bankers, which is why they're now facing sanctions because of their whaling industry. Because the Icelandic whaling industry is minuscule compared to that of Japan, but we're not putting any sanctions on Japan. So this is the way the banks get back at Iceland, because basically the Icelandic government got the better of them. This is from Christopher Booker at the time of the Murdoch scandal. He says, the euro now threatens the world with economic meltdown. Totally and completely. While Britain has been seemingly transfixed by Murdoch Gate, rolling down on us like a tsunami as a crisis so immensely great, and by comparison makes the misdemeanours of a few journalists, policemen and politicians look quite irrelevant. And that's exactly the case. Exactly the case. Everything that's going on right now is certainly a big part of taking the focus away from the fact that individuals, companies, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, in some cases large businesses, and governments have effectively been fleeced of their financial independence, and the banks are now sort of calling in everything. So what we're going through is this massive change, and I've referred to it as the shift. And what I've done with this presentation, I've really combined two presentations, look at the Illuminati cards and the significance of the Illuminati cards in what's going on right now, and the fact that we've got this shift going on. And the full title really of the presentation is "The Shift is About to Hit the Fan." Well, let me tell you, I think since I put that slide together, the shift has hit the fan. You know, and it's now flying all around, and you know, some people are well aware, some people are starting to sort of feel something, and other people are extremely well aware. So let's take a look at 18 months, because that's a really significant period. And it was 18 months ago, on April the 19th, well, it was April the 18th actually. On April the 18th, I was stuck in a hotel room in Lisbon, and the reason I was stuck there is I was on my way back from Mozambique, where I've been visiting my daughter, and ash cloud apparently covering the whole of Northern Europe. You'll remember that because they were the clearest blue skies anybody's ever seen for many years, yeah? Well, I was stuck in Lisbon, and I was in the hotel room there, and I thought, tomorrow's April the 19th. Well, the significance of that is it is the day of sacrifice by fire in the occult calendar of those who think they're the rightful rulers of the planet. And April the 19th, stroke 20th, are the dates of so many events. I mean, it's the day of the alcohol, tobacco and firearms attack on the Waco complex in Texas, in which at least 72 people died, many of them children, in a firestorm. 2 years later, it was the lone gunman, allegedly Timothy McVeigh, that put a truck bomb outside the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City, destroying the building, supposedly as a revenge attack on the alcohol, tobacco and firearms division of the FBI for what they'd done in Waco. But in reality, nobody from the alcohol, tobacco and firearms was in the office that morning. And the vast majority of people who killed in that terrible attack were children, because they were children that had been dropped off at the nursery at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I had this real sense of foreboding, sitting in the hotel room, and I thought, April the 19th, they're going to do something. They're absolutely going to do something. And I put out a newsletter, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think they're going to launch another event of great significance, the Day of Sacrifice by Fire. Of course, when I woke up, following day, April the 19th, everything was calm. And even we got through to the end of April the 19th, and everything was calm. But of course, the next day, this occurred, the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And I was getting a lot of emails from people on the 21st saying, Ian, is this the event you were talking about? Is this what you thought was going to happen? I said, well, I had no idea exactly what's going to happen. But my initial response was, you know what, I don't think so. I don't think so. And my reticence to acknowledge that this was the event that maybe I had been feeling or sensing was coming was due to my background, 20 years in the oil industry, 5 of which I was in Houston, Texas. And I didn't want to believe that my former colleagues in the oil industry would in any way, shape or form ever be party to such an event. Unfortunately though, I was wrong, and 5 weeks later I was able to establish not only that it was a deliberate event, I was actually able to name the individual who was put on the rig to make it happen. It wasn't this guy, Ronald Sepulvado. He was the most experienced company man in the BP fleet, and he was taken off of the BP Deepwater Horizon 4 days before the well blew. And he was replaced by a guy called Bob Kaluza, who's disappeared off the planet, and all photographs of this guy have been removed from the web, as have his counterpart, Donald Green. Bob Kaluza has refused to give any evidence to any of the Gulf Coast hearings. He's pleaded the Fifth Amendment, which of course means that basically he senses that if he gives evidence, it may well be incriminating. So Kaluza was put on the rig 4 days before the event. Sepulvado was taken off the rig on April the 16th, supposedly to attend a course on the safe operation of the blowout preventer at the bottom of the ocean, and replaced by Bob Kaluza, who in theory had no experience at all. I mean, it was outrageous that this guy was put on the rig. Anyway, I made a DVD of all of this, which was released in August last year, and BP managed to even keep it off of Amazon. Right? The DVD was on Amazon, but somehow it never made it until February this year. It never made it to Amazon's own search engine. And I had to, I spent about 6 weeks on the phone with Amazon trying to get them to overcome all the technical issues they had as to why you couldn't find that DVD on the search engine. Since February, we found it. Anyway, I know that it's now starting to have an impact because via, of course, a front organisation, but a front organisation in the Gulf Coast, working on behalf of BP, is now trying to sue me for $10 million. So clearly, we're getting through. We're getting through. And I've told them that they better get an extradition order in place because they ain't exactly going to be going over there voluntarily. Now, I'm going to show you something here, because this is the prima facie evidence that the US government is effectively owned by the corporations. This is a very short clip from a Senate debate on June the 30th of last year. And the motion before the Senate, this is the third reading of a motion before the Senate to give the Gulf Coast hearing the power of subpoena. Now, this motion had passed in the House of Representatives with only one objection. The one objection, by the way, was Ron Paul, but he must have had an off day, I think. But with Ron Paul being the exception, the motion passed through the House of Representatives. When the motion came to the Senate, this is the third reading, and this is the final reading, basically to give the Gulf Coast hearing the power of subpoena. The power of subpoena would enable the Gulf Coast hearing, which is being run by the Coast Guard, to demand that Bob Kaluza and Donald Verdreen actually turn up at the hearing, and even though they could still plead the Fifth and not actually talk, they could certainly be required and demanded to produce any written documentation that maybe had come their way. But just it's only a few minutes, but just listen to this.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged of S-3462, a bill to provide subpoena power to the National Commission on the British Petroleum Oil Spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and that the Senate then proceed to its consideration.
Is there objection?
On behalf of other members of the Republican Conference, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President?
Senator from New Hampshire.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 442 H.R. 5481, a bill to give subpoena power to the National Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill and offshore drilling. That the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to consider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. This is legislation that passed the House 420 to 1.
Is there objection?
On behalf of other members of the Republican Conference, I object.
The objection is heard.
Madam President,
The Senator from New Hampshire.
I don't understand what is so objectionable. In the House, 169 Republicans